family, friends, and students. Welcome to our first webcast. This is just a service for students and parents to know what we're doing in class and how we're doing it, and also, of course, for students to review. So welcome, and I'm glad that you're here. So we're just going to talk about what we did today. Today we talked about a circle and the parts of the circle. The three parts we focused on was the radius, the diameter, and the circumference. So I'm just going to give you a brief mini lesson on what the kids learned today. So they learned that a diameter is a line segment that passes through the center of the circle and joins two parts on the circle, 2 points on the circle. The main key idea here is that the diameter must pass through the center. Oops, move the whole thing. The diameter must pass through the center of the circle. That is the main idea. Students need to know that if it does not pass through the center of the circle, then it is not a diameter. For example, this would not be a diameter because it does not pass through the center of the circle. So a correct drawing of the diameter will be something like this. Okay? It is a line that clearly connects 2 points on the circle, but it has to pass through the center of the circle. So that is an example of diameter. Another example could be like this. Another example could be like this. As long as it's passing through the center of the circle and connecting to 2 points on the edge of the circle, it is a diameter. So one more example, a diameter could also look like this. So all these line segments I drew are examples of diameters. The second term we talked about today is radius. Any line segment drawn from the center of the circle to a point on the circle is called a radius. And more than one radius is known as a radii. So for example, this line segment that comes from the center of the circle to a point on the circle is known as a radius. Another example of a radius would be a line segment that goes from the point of the center of the circle to a point on the circle. Another example would be like this, from the center point to a point on the circle, from the center point to a point on the circle. All of these are examples of a radius. So for the actual example, students took notes and they just drew one solid example of what a radius might look like. So if you check their notes, you will see that it looks like this. And they labeled it radius. Okay? The other thing that we talked about is the relationship between the radius and the diameter. So I told the students that the radius is half the diameter. So, for example, if the diameter is 8, then the radius will be half of the diameter. So what's half of 8? 4. And if the diameter is 10, for another example, then what will be half of 10? 5. So the kids really need to understand that the radius is half of the diameter. So if we go back to our slide of the diameter, we can also talk about its relationship to the radius. So the diameter is 2 times the radius. And again, for example, if they give you a radii or a radius of 4, then you know the diameter is 2 times 4. So the diameter would be 8. And if they give you a radius of 5, then to find the diameter, you do 2 times 5, which is 10. So those are the main 2 terms we talked about today. And then the last term that we didn't spend too much time on was the circumference. And we will go into depth about this tomorrow. But what the students do know is that the circumference is the perimeter of the circle. So I showed them and I explained to them that the perimeter is just the outside edge of the circle. And they were to outline the perimeter. The perimeter is just the outside edge of the circle, also known as the circumference. So the perimeter of a circle is called the circumference. You will find attached worksheets to work with your child or to do some review attached to the webcast. Thanks.